Sometimes in racing games, you come across vehicles that don't actually exist. Whether they are inspired by real-life models or completely original designs, these vehicles provide something different compared to the countless racing games with licensed cars. However, there are people who look down on fictional vehicles, usually calling them cheap and not appreciating them. So, I'm here to argue that these vehicles do matter, as there are positive and interesting aspects that people might not realize. This is the importance of fictional vehicles in racing games. Using fictional vehicles isn't always about saving money, as it can be a deliberate design choice. If a developer wants to make a weaponized car combat game, they are essentially forced to use fictional vehicles. Companies wouldn't allow for weapons being attached to their cars, so developers have no other choice. For anyone who wants to make an anti-gravity racing game, well, there's no real-world equivalent to those vehicles. This means that developers have to design their own ships. If teams were stuck with using only real-world vehicles, we couldn't have gotten games like Burnout, Grip, Wipeout, or Full Auto. So while companies may go with fictional vehicles to save money, it can also be due to the type of racing game that they want to make. With fictional vehicles, there are really no restrictions. They don't have to look or sound a certain way. There are no safety regulations, contracts, or real-world physics to worry about. This means that developers have the freedom to do whatever they want, and this creativity is what I love. Some of my favorite fictional vehicles include the Subaru from Crash Time 5, Road King from Flat Out Ultimate Carnage, HSK 75 from Full Auto 2 Battle Lines, Ryback Brawler from Split Second, the list could go on. Of course, there are plenty of ugly vehicles and others that are just debadged models of their real-life counterparts. Despite this, there are many great fictional vehicles that show the amazing creativity that these designers have. Also, having no restrictions means that the developers can do something pretty impactful: damage models. Ever wonder why games with licensed cars really never have complex damage models? This is because manufacturers want their cars represented in a certain way, so showing them being essentially unsafe or not in pristine condition with heavy deformation isn't allowed. Since fictional vehicles have no companies behind them, developers can implement amazing damage models. From Burnout Paradise, Wreckfest, and Full Auto 2 Battle Lines, these racing games have some of the best vehicle deformation ever seen, all because their cars aren't real. Like I talked about previously, if a developer wants to make a racing game with a complex damage model, they have to use fictional cars. Not every game with fictional cars will have good or complex vehicle deformation. However, these vehicles give the team the opportunity to add this feature in, which games with licensed cars just can't do. With licensed cars, many times you'll see them in multiple games. Sometimes there might be an obscure car that only shows up in a few games. However, this really isn't the same for fictional vehicles. If I want to drive the Carson Annihilator, I have to play Burnout Paradise. I can only drive the El Matador in the Gas Guzzlers games. Fictional vehicles are essentially locked to a game or to multiple games in their respective series. Also, even if games have a vehicle based on the same real-life car, their interpretation will usually be completely different. All of this ends up building an identity for the game or its series. Especially if there's a certain stylization to all the vehicles, you might be able to quickly identify what game a particular vehicle came from. While racing games with licensed cars can also build an identity with their vehicles, fictional ones have the advantage here. These games have a certain charm and uniqueness due to having vehicles that you can't experience anywhere else. One huge issue with using real cars is the contracts. Many racing games have been and will be delisted due to expiring vehicle licenses, usually after 5 or so years. Some older games can't even be put on digital storefronts due to this same issue. However, games with fictional cars aren't affected, as like I mentioned previously, there is no outside company that owns these vehicles. That's why games like Flatout 2 and Burnout Revenge are still being sold to this day, as the only licensing they have to worry about is music. Heck, with a game like Split Second, it has fictional vehicles with an original, non-licensed soundtrack. This means that it is essentially delisting proof from any outside factors. While I doubt it's a conscious decision to use fictional cars to avoid delisting, it's a benefit regardless. Especially with a genre that really struggles with this issue, it's nice to know that games with fictional vehicles are way less likely to disappear in the future. I certainly don't want to make it seem like that I hate the existence of licensed cars in racing games, because I don't. I love seeing the Dodge Viper and Lamborghini Gallardo in the racing games that I play. However, I would also like for people to appreciate fictional vehicles more. Too often they are brushed aside when there are a lot of cool aspects. It can be a design choice for the type of game the developers are making. Modelers have the freedom to design whatever they want. They can add in complex damage models, create a certain identity, and ensure that their game is less likely to be delisted. So, the next time you play a game with fictional vehicles, make sure to give them some much needed appreciation. This has been Gamer Alex. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a great day.